From beautiful Jerusalem, welcome to this week's episode of Something for Shabbos on the Schmoozing podcast channel with me, David Goodwin, and Rabbi Menachem Salasnik. Parashat Chukat. So I don't really know what to say at the moment, so I'm just going to hand it over.
So it's packed. There's so much to talk about. It starts off with the rules of the red heifer, which is called a chok, a law without a reason that we can understand. Essentially what it is, if somebody becomes impure, they come in contact with death, they become ritually impure. And in order to get their purity back, they need to be sprinkled on with a mixture of water and ashes from a red heifer, a red calf that was slaughtered and then burned, and they take the ashes and mix it with water. So there's all the rules of that. Then we learn that Miriam, Moshe's sister, passes away. They had water, a well of water in her merit. So they no longer had that water. So they complained. This is the famous story where Moshe is told to speak to the rock, and instead of speaking, he hits it. Water comes out, but Moshe is told that because you didn't follow the instructions to glorify God's name correctly by speaking to the rock, and the water would have come out. So he wasn't going to enter the land of Israel.
It seems that, again, like I said last week, these trilogy of Parashat, again, it's a big one. It's a blow because, Moshe, can't believe it.
Although the sages tell us that if he'd entered the land, that would not have been good for us. Because if he'd entered the land and built a temple, such a great man building the temple couldn't have been destroyed. And therefore, because we'd done bad things, the wrath of God, shall we say, or the retribution would have come directly on us rather than on the temple. So the fact that he didn't enter and didn't build the temple meant that the structure didn't have the same holiness to it, and because it could end up being destroyed.
I always felt, and it could be a slightly off-piece interpretation, I always had the feeling that Moshe did it on purpose.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because of this. Because of something that he knew. He's like, I've got to do something. It was like a lishma. I'm not sure if it was, is it classed as an avera? I don't know. But I felt like Moshe's like, I'm going to sacrifice myself, which increases his humility. It's something that we would never have known because it was between basically him and Hashem. But I always felt like, this is so random that I think he's done this on purpose.
That's interesting.
And he did it for the sake of the people.
Could be.
Don't know. Anyway, so what? So then after that,
then they try and they ask the king of Edom to allow them to pass through. He doesn't allow them. They have to go all the way around. They start complaining yet again, and fiery serpents come and start attacking them. And there's this whole episode with the stick and the snake around it, the copper snake. And then eventually Aaron, Moshe's brother, passes away, and they get attacked because the clouds of glory, the clouds that protected them, were there in the merit of Aaron. They disappeared. And we end off the story with the battle against this man called Sihon and Og, these kings, powerful kings of neighboring towns, and the Israelites winning those battles. So
which is very pertinent for now because of Hezbollah and Iran and everything. But again, all these things just serve to remind us, hang in there. We don't know what's going to be, but be strong. Emunah. It's always, for me, it always comes back to that.
God is always on our side. The more we realize it, the more successful we'll be.
Definitely.
So that's the sort of the structure. Of the parasha. Much to talk about, but perhaps we should focus on the beginning. This concept of a chok, of a rule or a law that we don't get, and many people have difficulty with that. Why should I do something that I don't understand the reason? And I hear that argument. I really hear it. The way I like to think about it is this. Judaism is not a religion per se. Judaism is a relationship with the one who created us.
Nice.
That's what it is.
Very nice, yeah.
So if you think the best way to understand any of these rules is to think about relationships. So if, let's say, you've got a guy and his wife says to him, go and do this thing for me. And the guy says, why? And she says, listen, you know I love you. I can't explain why I need this, but I love you and you love me. Please just do it because I've asked.
Trust.
Yeah. And he says, I'm sorry, I can't do it unless I get it. There's no relationship there. More than that, all the things that he does do for her, he's not doing for her. He's really doing for himself. Because he only ever does something when he understands it. Right. So that shows that all of the other stuff he does isn't for her, it's for him. There's a famous phrase that we say it's in Tehillim. We say it every morning as part of our Pesukei de Zimra. It says, "Lo asachen lechol goy u'mishpatim bali da'um." God doesn't do what he does for us to the other nations, and they don't understand mishpatim. Now, a mishpat is a rule where there is a reason for it, or there is a reason that we can understand. Let's call them the moral laws, the laws that make sense to us.
Right.
Okay? So that's a bit weird. Why is the verse in Tehillim saying that the non-Jewish nations don't understand mishpatim, the moral laws? On the contrary, those are the rules that they do understand. So I had a brilliant explanation, and it's based on what we just said. When a person is doing rules, is doing actions, good behaviors, only when they understand it, they're not really doing it for the relationship, they're doing it for themselves. And therefore, mishpatim, which all these nations of the world, the Western world, are doing all of these moral rules, but they'll only do it if they understand it, which means they're self-serving. If we want to build a relationship, we need to be able to do a chok, something that we don't understand for the relationship. When we do that, we demonstrate that all of those other things, the ones which we do understand, we're not doing for ourselves because we understand it. We're doing it as part of the relationship. So being willing to do something that you don't understand demonstrates that all the other stuff that you're doing that you do understand, you're still doing them for the right reason. So we get mishpatim because we're willing to do something that when we don't get it.
Right. That's amazing. Wow. So it's the reverse. What about the laws that seemingly like 𝗵𝗄𝗃 and tefillin and all this stuff? We don't really understand that either. But do we are they in the area of chok?
There's some things that are clearly defined as chok. But yes, there are many, many other things where we're given some sort of reason, but the reason isn't necessarily something that fits into the Western values that we grew up with. So we're told what the reason for tefillin is, right? So that we have it on our heart and our heads, that our hearts and our minds are geared towards our Creator, to the one who's giving us everything. The sages say, Kabbalistically, they explain what this means, but the sages say that God wears his own tefillin. Now, obviously, God doesn't have an arm or a head, and therefore it must be a conceptual concept. Right. But the way I like to think about tefillin is that it's like, you can get these necklaces with like two halves, and like one person in the relationship wears one half and the other one wears the other half. Right. Good friends or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it happens to be. That's what tefillin are. We have inside our boxes of tefillin verses that talk about our love for Hashem. And the fact that we believe in him and he's only one and there's nothing, we've got nothing else apart from him. He is our whole life. And the Gemara tells us that inside God's boxes of tefillin, whatever that means, are the verses of him loving us, that we're his only people, and how much he cares about us. So it's almost like that sort of, that necklace broken in two. And so there is a real understanding of it. But yes, it doesn't quite fit into the Western morals of what goodness is. But again, I think it's so important, and people really miss this. Judaism is not a religion, it is a relationship. And if you think about your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with family, you think about what makes that work, those are the things that will work in this environment as well, and in our relationship with Hashem, which is why King Solomon talks about our relationship in terms, as we talked about this in the past. Remember, in our relationship between like a husband and a wife, or a man and his lover. But there's other sorts of relationships. But any form of relationship, that is what we need to focus on.
In a way, to plug your book again, why not?
Go on.
The Shmirat Halashon piece is this. Because how you speak defines your relationships.
That is so important, what you just said. Speech was given to make a connection. Rabbi Tatz, in one of his books, talks about the fact that we have two organs of connection. We have the mouth. We've got the lower organ of connection as well, obviously. But the mouth is a higher organ of connection. It is... It connects by the fact that we eat. It keeps us alive and connects our soul to our body, and it connects us with our fellow being. Without that speech, we wouldn't be able to communicate. So that's very important, and it connects us with our Creator in our prayers, in our learning Torah, learning His wisdom. So our mouth is that organ of connection. It is the higher organ of connection. You know. As you brought it up, all animals have the lower organ of connection, okay? We are the only animals who, when we use that lower organ of connection, we do it face to face. The other animals don't do that mating face to face. Why? Because it's not just about the lower organ.
Right.
We want to connect. We kiss with our mouth. We speak to each other in a loving way. It's about reaching this higher level of connection. And
the point of intimacy is relationship.
Exactly. The whole point of it is that connection. So therefore our mouth brings that connection, and our mouth brings the connection also in our relationship with Hashem.
This show is brought to you by Dream Digital Art, the place to buy the coolest Jewish and Israel-related art pieces and products. As a schmoozing podcast fan, you'll get 10% off your online order with the promo code shmooze10.